Hello and welcome to episode 109 of the How to Survive podcast. And we were up all night, Chris, from dusk till dawn this week.
Yeah.
The 1996 classic, directed by Robert Rodriguez, and starring George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino.
Yes, and Harvey Keitel.
Yes.
Yes.
And the bloke from Machete.
Yeah, Danny Trejo.
Yeah. I'm Joe. Joining me as ever is Chris.
Hello.
How are you?
I am so excited to talk about this film. After the cold delights of Let the Right One In last week, it's the hot mess of From Dusk Till Dawn.
More on that later.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen From Dusk Till Dawn, it is available on Netflix in the UK. So go ahead and watch it before we throw on with our discussion, which is spoiler-filled.
Yes, it is. We are going to ruin the film even harder than Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah. So let's throw on. Let's get right into it. We'll recap the plot, then we'll talk about what we liked, what we didn't like. Try and keep that equal if we can.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about how we would survive if we found ourselves in the titty twister from dusk until dawn.
Yeah.
On that fateful night. So, on with the show.
Yes.
Everybody be cool. You be cool. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Low profile. You understand the meaning of the words low profile?
Sure.
Two of America's most dangerous criminals have taken hostages.
What is this? It's called a punch. I'm going to ask you one question, and all I want is a yes or no answer. Do you want to live through this?
Yes.
Okay, Ramblers, let's get rambling.
One night is all that stands between them and freedom.
This is my kind of place.
But it's going to be one hell of a night.
We might be in trouble. We got a bunch of fucking vampires out there trying to get in here and suck our fucking blood.
Now, their only chance is to fight back.
Oh, yeah!
Harvey Keitel, George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Juliette Lewis.
Welcome to slavery.
No, thanks. I already had a wife.
From dusk till dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn tells the story of Seth and Richie Gecko, career criminals and brothers who have just robbed a bank, and now they're on their way to Mexico. On the way, they get into a scrape, which ends in the killing of a Texas Ranger and a liquor store clerk, and the destruction of the liquor store.
Yes.
They head to a motel where Richie rapes and murders a hostage that they took in the bank robbery.
Yep.
Also staying in the motel is Jacob Fuller, who is on a road trip with his children Scott and Kate, who are both teenagers. Until recently, Jacob was a minister, but has lost his faith in God following the death of his wife in a car crash. Seth and Richie force their way into the Fuller family's room and hold them hostage at gunpoint. They demand that Jacob help them cross the border into Mexico in his motorhome, with the two children brought along as hostages. Richie begins making advances on Kate, but is continually reprimanded by Seth. They cross the border into Mexico, and Seth tells Jacob to drive to a bar called Titty Twister. The plan is for Seth and Richie to meet a criminal contact named Carlos at the bar, sometime before dawn. They plan to pay him money in order to be allowed sanctuary in Del Rey. Del Rey?
I think it's... Oh, it doesn't matter, does it?
No. A local town, basically. Once at the bar, Seth grows immediately violent and begins drinking heavily, forcing his hostages to drink with him. The bar staff are all immediately hostile, which brings out the worst in Seth, who continues to become more violent. Before long, a dancer named Santanico Pandemonium takes to the stage and performs an erotic dance, culminating in a lap dance for Richie's benefit. After the dance, 3 bouncers who Seth assaulted earlier gather to enact a revenge attack. As the fight begins, the bouncers, along with all the bar staff and strippers, reveal that they are in fact vampires.
Mm-hmm.
The humans in the bar fight the vampires and kill all of them very quickly. Unfortunately, Richie is bitten by Santanico Pandemonium and is now also dead. He soon revives as a vampire, but is immediately killed by Seth. The survivors, which is Seth, Jacob, Scott and Kate, and they're joined by a biker named Sex Machine and a Vietnam vet named Frost. They fight a second wave of vampires who were all the human patrons from earlier who were killed in the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
They easily kill all of them, but Sex Machine is sadly bitten. While Frost gives a monologue about his experience in Vietnam, Sex Machine, who is now a vampire, jumps on his back and bites him. And then he bites Jacob. Frost throws Sex Machine through a window, inadvertently letting in a swarm of vampire bats, which all transform into vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Seth and the Fuller children take refuge in a storage room in the back of the bar. The room is filled with cargo from the various trucks driven by the various truckers who have met their demise in the bar. They begin to put together some anti-vampire weapons, including a pneumatic drill with a wooden stake attachment, a crossbow which shoots wooden stakes, a shotgun, and holy water, which is blessed by Jacob, who has now found God again. Jacob forces his way back into the storage room and reveals that he's on borrowed time, having been bitten shortly before. He orders his children to kill him if he turns into a vampire. The group force their way back out and begin slaying vampires. Jacob transforms, but Scott hesitates in killing his father and is bitten by him. Scott kills Jacob with holy water, and Kate shoots Scott, killing him.
Yeah.
Kate and Seth are surrounded, but then the sun rises, and the bullet holes in the building allow sunlight in, preventing the vampires from attacking.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos arrives and shoots gigantic holes in the door, bathing the room in light and killing all the vampires. Carlos and Seth strike a deal for Seth's safety and drive away, leaving Kate to find her own way back in the RV. And that's what happens in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes.
So, Chris,
Mm-hmm.
what did you think?
I hated this film. I really, really hated this film.
Really?
It's a really ugly film, I think. We were saying how beautiful Let the Right One In was last week. And this is the opposite in almost every way.
Yeah.
It's spiritually ugly. It's aesthetically ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the characters are reprehensible beyond belief. With, I suppose, the exception of the family, but they're sort of along for the ride and not really, they're not given a chance to do anything of their own volition anyway.
No, exactly. I mean, I was with it for the first maybe 10 minutes.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay. Exploitation, crime thriller. Tarantino, say what you want about him, he does make a good crime film.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine, maybe until the pop-up revolver dick. That really was the...
Yeah. That was
a major turning point for me.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't like Quentin Tarantino as an individual.
No.
Like, he has made some very good films that I enjoy. He's also made some films that I do not enjoy. And I think, with some exceptions, his writing is typically, I find, irritating.
Right.
And I find every character has his voice.
Yeah.
That's compounded in this film by the fact that one of the characters is Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. I mean, that is a common criticism of his movies. That everyone talks like him. They have an Asperger's-like knowledge of cult cinema, and they swear all the time.
Yes.
Whether they live in 1840s in the Deep South, or whether they are Quentin Tarantino driving a car.
Yeah.
Mark Kermode says that they will talk like the annoying kid who works in a movie rental store.
Yes.
Which is true, because that's what Tarantino was when he started writing films.
Exactly.
But I would say that criticism can equally be levelled at Robert Rodriguez, who seems incapable of writing characters fit for anything other than a graphic novel about Mexican drug dealers.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing that really annoyed me in this film was some of the dialogue. In particular, I think the final nail in the coffin for me was Seth's line right at the end. Don't know if you remember it.
Go on.
I may be a bastard, but I'm not a fucking bastard.
Right, yeah. I think the part that made my toes curl so much that my Achilles tendons almost snapped.
Yeah.
Was my name's Sex Machine.
Yeah.
Pretty lame.
The bit where Cheech Marine shows up again and like looks directly down the lens and says something about pussy after he's talked about pussy for 60 unbroken seconds.
Yeah, I was thinking about opening this episode with that clip, but it went on like so long it became like upsetting.
Yeah. It's
offensive.
Yeah.
Alright, pussy, come on in, pussy lovers! Here at the Titty Twister, we're slashing pussy in half. Give us an offer on our vast selection of pussy. This is a pussy blowout. Alright, we got white pussy, black pussy, Spanish pussy, yellow pussy. We got hot pussy, cold pussy. We got wet pussy. We got smelly pussy. We got hairy pussy, bloody pussy. We got snapping pussy. We got silk pussy, velvet pussy, nalga hide pussy. We even got horse pussy, dog pussy, chicken pussy. Come on, you want pussy? Come on in, pussy lovers. If we don't got it, you don't want it. Pussy shoppers, take advantage of our penny pussy sale. If you buy one piece of pussy at the regular price, you will get another piece of pussy of equal or lesser value for only a penny. Try and beat pussy for a penny. If you can find cheaper pussy anywhere, fuck it.
I think the film has like a genuinely repulsive attitude towards women.
Yeah.
Towards sexual violence.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, violence in general. And also, if you take the idea that Richie is sort of like on the autistic spectrum, it's a pretty reprehensible attitude towards that as well.
Yeah.
Like basically anything that this film touches turns into sort of morally repugnant.
Yeah. Because they weren't writing like, what would be interesting is to have like, it's not like Rain Man where Tom Cruise is trying to help his brother who has autism.
Yeah.
It's like, wouldn't it be funny if one of the characters is mildly autistic?
Yeah.
Because that would be edgy. Everyone would laugh at that.
It's edgy, yeah. And I think, don't make... I mean, I couldn't care for either of the main characters because they're just amoral rapist murderers and there's no character development to them whatsoever.
I'm fine with having an anti-hero. All the best modern cinema has an anti-hero, I think.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to side with a murdering rapist, you're right. And as a secondary point, Seth, I guess, is supposed to be like a swaggering buccaneer.
Like Han Solo figure.
Yeah. But he's a dick. He's entirely unlikable.
Yeah.
And the fact that they open the film, more or less, means that it's already off to like a painful start.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get better from there.
No. I mean, Seth has non-ironic tribal tattoos. And at no point is his bravado sort of undercut with humour or at no point is he knocked up. Yeah, he's never knocked off his perch. And I think it sort of highlights the film's biggest failing maybe, which is that it's just very self-consciously trying to be cool. Yeah. And as we all know, that is the least cool thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That can be.
And what it's also trying to be is a grindhouse movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a similar point to trying to be cool is grindhouse movies were bad unintentionally.
Yes.
They were trying to make a good film and failed.
Yeah.
Now, if you try to make a bad film, you're making a bad film.
Yes.
It's therefore less enjoyable. If you try and bake in the elements that make it funny when you watch a bad film, then it's just shit.
It's not even necessarily that they're bad films. It's that they're films made on tiny budgets with very creative use of that budget. El Mariachi, I think was made for $7,000 or something, and went on to make millions, right? And when you watch it, you're watching it with that context, and so it's enjoyable on that level.
That's Robert Rodriguez's first film.
Exactly, yeah. Now, watching something like From Dusk Till Dawn, which is as I said, self-consciously trying to imitate that style, is that it doesn't work because there's not that like level of enjoyment that you can take from it going, oh, isn't it impressive that what they did with,
Yeah.
it's a creative way of doing it.
Another
Nothing in this
example.
film is creative. Like it's just, it's not like they had to figure out a creative way of doing a scene where someone's head explodes because they had Tom Savini, who, worked on all the Friday the 13th movies and all that sort of stuff and was like a renowned gore special effects person, and so he just did that for them, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and it looks like fairly convincing, but it's not interesting.
No, exactly. It feels unearned.
Yeah,
I think like the look of it feels like you've just slapped a filter on it or something to make it look like, isn't it cool that we did this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example of something with a low budget that did well is something like Brain Dead. Peter Jackson's early film, where it's a similar thing. It's gory. He's fighting against a ton of zombies, but he's killing them with a lawnmower because that's pretty much all they had access to.
Yeah, Evil Dead. Yeah. Like the film's joy in a lot of ways is watching how Sam Raimi manages to make the most of a very modest budget, and so you can appreciate the film on that level. You can't appreciate From Dusk Till Dawn on that level, and so the fact that it's like aping that style in a very self-conscious manner just makes it, it's almost like pointless to watch or something.
So Robert Rodriguez's past movies, From Dusk Till Dawn, Machete 2, Desperado, El Mariachi, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, Planet Terror, as I said, they're all basically Mexican drug dealer novels, aren't they?
Yeah.
His best film is Spy Kids.
Right.
According to Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
And according to me as well, it is probably his best film. Actually, I do like Sin City.
Right.
But that gets a big pass because he didn't write it. He's adapting it from Frank Miller.
Yeah. He didn't write this either. Quentin Tarantino wrote it.
Well, yeah, but come on.
Yeah. They're best mates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like El Mariachi and Desperado as, an exercise in that sort of stupidity Mexican action movie type style. But, by the time it gets to Once Upon a Time in Mexico, it's a successful franchise. And so he gets a massive budget and then, comparatively speaking at least, and then the fun goes out of it, which is exactly the same problem with this.
So I mentioned the dick popping revolver thing as being a turning point for the film. Let's say we move that a bit and say that's when I became most wary of it, and I gave up completely when the vampires showed up. Right. And the reason for that is the fights were just interminable. At one point, it was like Gremlins.
Yeah.
It's just like different scenarios around the bar with people in rubber masks doing unthreatening things, sometimes lewd things.
Yeah, all of them, or a majority of them, strippers as well.
Yeah.
It's just, means they have their tits out.
Yeah, visually uninteresting and mildly offensive.
Yeah.
The problem with scenes like that, right, when there's a lot of enemies fighting against a small group, is you have to establish the stakes early on, right?
Yeah.
That's not the wooden stakes that kill the vampires, but it's the threat.
Yeah.
That usually means having someone die and proving that the threat is somewhat insurmountable. Now, I'll grant you Richie dies at the beginning of that.
Yeah.
But
that is sweet relief to the audience.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, great.
Yeah.
You don't feel much grief about the rapist murderer being killed when in a film.
No.
If one of the child had been killed, that would be like, oh, there's higher stakes. But you don't really care about any of them dying, so fine. I mean, if you take something, a good example would be the Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones last season, I think.
Yeah.
Where you establish early on that the army of enemies is not fucking about, and there's a genuine threat that people could die, right?
Sure.
Or all the battles in Lord of the Rings, it's kind of like up for grabs, anyone could die, and the threat is real. We've seen what they can do. Or more recently, Dunkirk, where bullets kill people, so don't get shot, right? And there's a high risk of you getting shot. They establish the stakes early on, and the enemy is a challenge to overcome.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have things like the Star Wars prequels, right, where you end up with clones fighting against robots, which are both disposable,
Yeah.
and thousands get destroyed on each side, but never a main character. No main character is ever harmed in those films by an army on either side, right?
Yeah.
Or when Neo in Matrix Reloaded fights against 500 Agent Smiths.
Yeah. It loses its luster.
Yeah, and not one of them ever lands a punch on him.
Yeah.
So it's like, why should we care? And that's basically that feeling of why should I care is from Dusk Till Dawn, second and third act, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the problem for me, I think, is that like the surprise vampire twist is good. Like it's a good concept, but it's not clever. Like it's not clever to just crowbar another film into the film that that you're halfway through,
right?
Unless you're making a comment on either like the heist criminal movie or making comment on a vampire movie, right? And From Dusk Till Dawn doesn't do either of those things.
Exactly.
Right? It just slaps vampires into a film.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what happens, right? It would be better if, the vampires somehow illuminated a character trait or motivated a character arc for any of the characters, but it doesn't do that at all. And it does nothing interesting with the vampire premise or the heist premise. And for that reason, it's a failure when it, you take it as a genre bending film.
Yeah.
Like, a film like Shaun of the Dead, for example, works when you combine those two genres of comedy and horror, because you're like highlighting all the tropes of the horror that are familiar to the horror fans, but relocating it to an English London suburb.
Yeah, and giving it elements of a rom-com as well.
Yeah, and then also you still maintain the horror elements, right?
Yeah.
So like if you had a vampire film, you would expect it to be scary. You would expect there to be some sort of tension and like stakes, as you said, of both kinds. And if it's a crime film, you'd expect like character arcs in terms of like maybe people becoming anti-heroes or going even, becoming even more criminal.
Or meeting like the two characters hit a fork and go their separate ways.
Exactly, yeah. Or there's some sort of narrative development in that regard. But it doesn't do that either. So there's you combine a vampire film with none of the interesting things about vampire films, with a crime film with none of the interesting things about crime films, and this is what you end up with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a mess, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I mean, another couple of good examples, by the way, of genre benders. Bone Tomahawk.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which starts as a cowboy film
Yeah.
and actually ends up being a study on masculinity, basically.
Yeah,
when they reveal.
but that's an example of a film which does that thing of like halfway through the film it slaps another film into it.
Yeah,
but like it works because it explores the whole cowboy versus Indians thing in a new way.
Yeah,
and it's frightening, and the character arcs of all the characters still matter.
Yeah, and all the characters are manly men trying to posture and be manly.
Yeah.
Who come across much manlier men.
Yeah, exactly.
But to take that to the extreme where they're just driven by what could be considered like things that drive men, I guess.
Yeah.
Typically. Another example would be Cabin in the Woods, which is more of a study on horror, right? On horror tropes.
Yeah.
So it starts out as a typical horror movie and it takes a twist partway through that, which kind of examines those tropes and says how silly they are.
Yeah.
Right? I've got to talk about it quite broadly because I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah,
but
it's worth checking out if you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, but both of those are fine examples. We've covered it in the past of movies that do successfully blend genres in the ways you discussed earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear for us, at least, why we don't like From Dusk Till Dawn. There is one thing that I like, though, in the film, and that's the final shot, which shows the top of the nightclub and then pulls back to reveal like an immense like slaughter pit and an Aztec temple, which is presumably been there for thousands of years, right? That is the most interesting point of the whole film because it like at least implies some sort of backstory or mythology to it, like so it's giving it an extra sort of context rather than just, oh no, there's vampires. Like there's a reason for the vampires being there. And suddenly the idea of this truck stop being like a a way to lure people in, that becomes, more interesting. But unfortunately, the film has finished like, by the time the first interesting thing happens in the film.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I just want to say is that Cheech Marine is not a punchline just in and of himself.
No.
You can't just keep putting Cheech Marine in a film and that just being a joke. Like,
No.
it's just because he's the border patrol officer.
Yeah.
He's the announcer stood outside the front of the nightclub.
Yeah.
And he's Carlos at the end.
Right. So
if
Robert Rodriguez has gone, we've managed to get Cheech Marin in. This is going to be fucking amazing because we're going to put him in.
I presume what it's saying is like, it's either again like one of these like low budget B movie tropes that people play loads of different characters because the budget's so low, which we've discussed that already, really. Or it's like a comment on like Americans' view of Mexicans as being like a homogenous people,
Right.
and like you could just interchange loads of different ones.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work on that level because no one in the film is really racist. Like that's not an issue that really comes up, and it like there's no commentary on that idea throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
So it's just a joke, like for the audience to go, "Oh look, we've already seen that guy, and now he's playing a different role."
Yeah.
But that's just I don't care.
It's like Jack Nicholson in Mars Attacks.
Right,
It's just like doing it for the sake of it. Although I think Jack Nicholson said he'd play every role if he was allowed.
Yeah, well, see, that's the film that I'd want to see when next time I sit down to watch Mars Attacks.
Yeah.
That'd be a better film.
Yeah. So you mentioned you like the big reveal of the pyramid at the end. I'm not so sure I did like that as much because it's like, well, why didn't you just go downstairs? But fine. But what I liked about it, right, was the concise like scripting on one particular scene, which is when Seth says, I know what's going on. We've got a bunch of fucking vampires out there trying to get in here and suck our fucking blood. And that's it. Plain and simple. I don't want to hear anything about I don't believe in vampires because I don't believe in vampires, but I believe my own two eyes and what I saw is fucking vampires. Now, do we all agree that we're dealing with vampires? No, that's good because it establishes that they are dealing with vampires.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like after watching I Am Legend, you go, no, I'm not. Were they vampires? Were they not? This is like, no, they're vampires.
It's like you get most horror films that deal with such a like genre tropey sort of notion do that thing where but none of our characters will like say the word zombie.
Yeah.
With this one it's like they're fucking vampires.
Yeah. But that also gives us a good lead in to establish what we need to know about these particular vampires. And that's coming up after this.
This episode of How to Survive is sponsored by Mr. T Luxury Teas, who bring you this week's piece of useless IMDb trivia. This week's film is from Dusk Till Dawn. Richie's broken glasses are an homage to the film Straw Dogs. That fact might not be worth knowing, but Mr. T certainly is. Head over to Mr. T Luxury Teas to choose from a wide range of traditional, herbal and fruit teas from all over the world, packed with health benefits and gathered to help you get the most out of your day. Visit mr-tea.co.uk or Google Mr. T Luxury Teas to find us. Use offer code SURVIVE at checkout to receive 10% off any order you make.
So you mentioned, Chris, that the Clooney's character,
The Clooney,
he establishes that they are vampires, and then they begin a discussion of what these particular type of vampires, what traits they have.
Yeah.
And they establish that they have superhuman strength. They will agree on that. That they are susceptible to crosses, holy water, sunlight, and wooden stakes, of course.
Yeah, like a bad goalkeeper. Scared of crosses.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think...
That's a football joke.
How the holy water, sunlight, and wooden stakes worked into it, but... do you want me to set you up again? So
no,
it's
that's
just
fine. No, I'm happy with it as it is.
Right. And that they have incredibly flimsy chest tissue, allowing for stakes to easily be driven through their hearts.
Yeah, a character even says, they don't feel like real bodies, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's established as like a trait of these vampires.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And something I noticed is that they all start out as quick-witted fighters, these vampires, but by the end they are a horde of zombies. So something's gone wrong there, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's not gone well.
No. The only thing that's gone wrong is Robert Rodriguez saying, I'd like to make this film, and someone saying, here's $15 million, please go and make this film.
20.
Really?
Yeah. How would you survive? How would you survive in From Dusk Till Dawn, Joe?
Well, if I was a vampire,
Mm-hmm.
I would wear chest armor,
Okay.
stab vest,
Yeah,
readily available even in the 90s.
that's true. The problem is with their flesh, as we said, makes it easy for them to be impaled.
Yeah.
So yeah, just everyone wear a sort of Iron Man
Yeah.
plate on their chest.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much going to save
It
them.
make it a lot harder. Well, they can still be decapitated, I suppose.
Yeah, but I'd say 90% of the zombies are killed with a stake through the heart, aren't they?
Zombies.
But they are by the end.
90% of the vampires are
Yes.
killed with a stake through the heart.
Yeah.
Well, what about all the other things though, like holy water? But then I suppose you're playing the odds, aren't you? So you could just wear a boiler suit with a chest plate as well.
Yeah.
And like a neck brace.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you'd think after what looks like thousands of years, they would have come up with some kind of
Yeah.
armor or like protection for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's not in Predator, right? The reason Arnold is able to beat Predator is because he's like the toughest marine in the world.
Yeah.
What you've got here is thousands upon thousands of presumably hundreds of years old vampires
Yeah.
who are good at fighting,
Yeah.
being beaten by some children, and that's not as compelling.
No, it's it doesn't seem. Yeah, the children don't have any experience of fighting, so they're clearly not very well prepared. Unless it's just they have a constant stream of sort of new recruits because every night loads of people flood to the titty twister,
Right.
and then they all get turned into vampires, and so it's sort of like people are constantly having to be taught.
Right. Okay. So
Maybe down in the depths of the temple, there's like the elders, and they're,
Yeah. I'm assuming if we watched From Dusk Till Dawn 2 and 3, that would probably be the case.
do those exist?
Yep. And there's also a series on Netflix.
Yes, I have seen that.
You've seen it?
I've seen
That it exists.
That it exists. Yeah.
That's enough.
Yes. Yeah, I certainly won't be seeking it out.
So you agree that a chest plate would be useful?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Any thoughts from you?
As long as it wasn't made out of. Oh no, wait, Silver's werewolves, isn't it?
Well, that's discussed at length in this film.
Right.
And they agree it doesn't matter because none of them have any silver on them.
Right. Okay.
Which is a funny line, but it's delivered in the context of a boring film. The funniest thing for me, by the way, in the whole film was the guy who was trying to stack dominoes while there was a stripper dancing on his table.
Right.
That was funny.
A sight gag.
Yeah, because it happened twice, and that was funny twice.
Yeah.
And I was like, can we have more of him, please?
Yeah. Just the rest of the film is him.
Yeah.
Going like, oh, come on. Yeah. Well, I mean, I found it hard to think of one that doesn't go against the character's motivations to be like reprehensible human beings, because, but something that also actually increases their likelihood of surviving. Because you could say,
don't rob a bank.
Yeah, or like don't kidnap families or other people, or don't leave Richie alone with people.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be helpful having Richie leave a trail of dead bodies across America.
No.
Very easily traceable route.
Yeah.
But I guess one suggestion I would have is don't make promises you can't keep.
Okay. And who's that suggesting? Who are you suggesting that to?
I'm suggesting it to Scott, the younger of the children, the teenage boy, because Scott promises to kill Jacob, and as we know, he hesitates.
Yeah.
And he dies as a result. So don't be a liar.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if you're in a team dynamic. Okay. If you don't feel up to a task, don't volunteer for it, because you'll let people and ultimately yourself down.
Yeah.
And that's good advice not only for the characters From Dusk Till Dawn, but for anyone working on any sort of like team project. Maybe you're in a sports team, or a work group of any kind.
Just own up if you're not up to a certain task.
Yeah, exactly, because you're not helping anyone by lying, right? And and Scott lies and says that he'll be fine with killing Jacob, and he's not, and he dies.
Now I have a question.
Okay.
Let's just transfer it to another situation. So we're in a work situation like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So you're you work in video production, right?
Yes.
Suppose I said, Chris, can you add some Foley to this particular clip?
Mm-hmm.
You're not a Foley artist.
Well, I would feel up for that task, but yeah, I take your idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want you to add some Foley to this clip.
Yeah.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, you can't do that.
Okay, yeah.
What do you say?
I'd say, well, that's not where my expertise lies.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone else in the team who would be better suited to that task? Or is there someone that we can hire in remotely?
Now, I've got a gun to my head, and I'm going to kill myself in 5 seconds if you don't agree to do it. 4.
Well,
3,
no, because also,
2,
like George Clooney over there, George Clooney is a Foley artist. His job is recording Foley.
Yeah.
So, like, we've seen throughout the events of this film, he is very adept. He is very adept at Foley.
Yeah.
Why are you asking me, someone who has an emotional investment in not recording Foley,
Right.
to do the Foley when George Clooney would gladly do the Foley, and he's right over there in the same team? That's my question.
Because you need to, if old George Clooney was, on annual leave and unable to.
No, but he's not on annual leave. He is there.
Yeah, but he might go on. Okay, he might go
He
on annual leave.
might go on annual leave midway through the project.
Yeah.
Well, then that's poor management, isn't it? Really, like that's allowing a crucial member of the working group to go on annual leave midway through the project.
What if he falls ill?
Well, if he falls ill, then obviously, you would have to rely on other people in the team, but you'd also have to accept that they might not be up to the task.
Yeah.
But my recollection from the film is that George Clooney does not fall ill.
No.
And he still appears to be able to record Foley at the end of the film.
Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah.
So key deliverable in this, Foley
equals Jacob being killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually Scott does record the Foley, but it's too late by that point.
Too late, right.
Yeah, it's like
they've already launched.
Yeah, exactly. The video's already out there.
Yeah.
And people are going,
and
why aren't those trees rustling?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So if anyone doesn't know, Foley is where you record sounds over video clips to make them sound a bit clearer or look a bit more authentic. Yeah. And we were using that as an analogy for Jacob,
an incredibly laboured
compelling his son to kill him if he turns into a vampire.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't do. And Jacob turns and bites Scott in return. And George Clooney is able to.
Here's the question. Would Scott have survived if he'd immediately killed?
Yes.
Yeah. Would he have also survived if it was known among the group that he wasn't able to kill his father and he turned to his sister, for example, and said, Dad's turning? Like, because, he's wrestling with the in a debate, isn't he? Whereas if it was a universally acknowledged fact that he wouldn't be able to do it, he would simply turn and go, George Clooney, please shoot my dad now. Yeah,
but like I said before, the negotiation is either you agree or I'll kill myself right now.
No, but that's a aggressive negotiation tactic.
Yeah, but it works.
Well, no, it doesn't, because he doesn't get the result that he wants.
Yeah, that's true.
If the negotiation tactic is you've got 5 seconds to volunteer to record the Foley, or I'm going to put the video out with no Foley on it.
Right.
That's a poor.
Yeah, because you want the video to have Foley.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
No one's getting what they want from that situation.
Right. Okay.
And ultimately, that's selfish on the part of the person who's putting the video out.
Yeah, the producer.
Yeah. Have you got any laboured metaphors that you want to talk about?
I'm going to go back to the vampires again. And I'm going to say, there's a big sign outside the Titty Twister.
Yeah.
It says, from dusk till dawn. Open from dusk till dawn. Now, what happens at dawn?
Sun rises.
And what happens when sun rises?
They all die.
Right. So my suggestion is to move your trading hours to from dusk until a few hours before dawn.
Right. A
Therefore,
few hours, yeah.
Giving you a chance to get to safety.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean,
what you
it
notice
should
is-
be. It should be just be able to go downstairs, and there aren't any windows in the venue.
Yeah.
So were it not for the gunshots going off everywhere,
Yeah. Why don't they
you could also say like, why don't they have bulletproof doors?
Yeah. I guess they didn't anticipate what happened that.
Well, they should have
evening
done. They've got thousands of years doing this
to prepare it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fair point. But I mean, yeah, like.
I agree with you that they would have stood a better chance of surviving if they'd moved the opening hours. Yeah, but maybe from just after dusk till a few hours before dawn isn't as pithy a movie title.
No, it isn't. From 8 till late.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's my second point.
Yeah. I don't think they're adhering to the opening hours when they're fighting Seth and Kate at the end. So.
No, I guess not. But I would say at that point, I would say that Carlos wouldn't have showed up because he only goes to that place because it's open until dawn.
No, but he gets there after dawn because the sun's rising. So
Yeah.
he's getting there after it's shutting anyway.
That's true.
This is a poorly thought out idea, really, isn't it? And also, Carlos, I mean, this ties into my final idea.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos admits he's never been to Titty Twister, right? So he should really, if he does it, you know, like we all want to branch out and go to new interesting places, right? So TripAdvisor is a very good website for sort of, determining which places have good reviews. Because you can, leave reviews, you can read other people's reviews.
Yeah, I get you.
Right? And these websites have stringent checks to ensure that fake accounts and bots don't post reviews of places, to artificially bump up the ranking. And it would quickly, I think, become apparent that no one who goes there ever leaves the premises,
Right?
because all the reviews would be coming from within the venue, and all the people whose accounts were registered would disappear.
Yeah. Two things here. One.
Yeah.
You would just not list it on TripAdvisor and you'd be okay.
Is it the responsibility of the?
I believe so. Yeah.
Well, I mean, similar services exist. Google reviews.
Yeah, Yelp.
Yeah, exactly.
Second point. Movie set in 1996.
Yeah,
the internet had yet to become entirely mainstream.
It's true. Yeah, but I mean, it is out there. I'm sure a similar service of sorts existed at the time.
So you're thinking, right?
Right, like Time Out, for example.
Carlos strike you as a man who's, up on it?
Well, my point is that if he had done that, then he would have stood a better chance of surviving.
But not, he couldn't have done because TripAdvisor doesn't exist.
No, but if he had checked a similar service,
but
like
it wouldn't
a review
have been that in 1996.
Well, then you're being unimaginative.
And if you went on Time Out doesn't review like 1-star places in the print version. It gives you like places to go.
Right. Yeah, but then so Titty Twister wouldn't have been on there. So if he'd have
so you looked at it, you go, there's a place nearby called
Nipple Slippers or something like that, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Just check where you're going before you go there.
So final thought from me.
Okay.
I'm going for the vampires again.
Yeah.
So it's 3 for 3 for the vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you catch more flies with honey, don't you, than vinegar?
Yeah.
So why is it when what essentially amounts to like fresh food walks in the door, why do they berate it and try and get it to leave?
Yeah, I don't really understand. I mean, I have a theory.
Yeah.
A poorly written
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a poorly written theory.
No. My theory is watertight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in
the context of the I mean, I don't know. Maybe somewhere they innately sense that Seth is
something's going to go wrong.
Yeah, is too powerful for them to.
From an economic perspective, I guess it would make more sense to have, instead of having like an aggressive and hostile biker bar, have like a family-friendly hotel.
Yeah,
where you can attack people in their sleep, and without like minimal fuss, basically.
It's more of a paper trail with a hotel, though, isn't there?
No,
and
it doesn't need to be.
Well, I mean, if we think back to Psycho, he had a similar operation, really.
Yeah.
And that eventually came back to bite him, no pun intended.
Because he had meticulous records.
Well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, like, you know, it all caught up with him, basically. Also, I'd imagine that the sorts of people who frequent Titty Twister are less likely to be looked for in the event they go missing as entire families.
That's a fair point. So maybe their business model is actually pretty good.
Yeah, well, it seems to be working for them until Seth turns up. So maybe they just need to rethink. I mean, he seems to get sort of drunk and belligerent, so maybe he would have been aggressive regardless of how aggressive they were to him.
Yeah. If Cheech Marin at the beginning, when they arrived, not Cheech Marin the border crossing guard or Cheech Marin Cartloss, Cheech Marin the greeter, if he'd gone, oh, hi guys, welcome to Titty Twister, come on in, I'll make sure you get to a table.
Yeah, have a lovely time.
Yeah. Then everyone would have been like really relaxed and they could have probably attacked them pretty easily.
Yeah, you could put like sleeping pills in their drinks or something like that, and they'd all fall asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. So some sage advice.
Yeah. Wow, Chris, we've been up all night talking about this.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride.
Yeah. Let's go out into the sunlight because we can do that because we're not vampires.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week to talk about Paranormal Activity 2, the second in the franchise.
Yeah.
She normally got the two means at the end.
Yes.
Of the title.
Yeah, it does. A prequel and sequel.
Yeah.
To the first.
Oh, spoilers.
Yeah.
Watched it today, mate, and I have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, look forward to hearing them.
Yeah.
If you've got any thoughts on Paranormal Activity 2, the email address is howtosurviveshow@gmail.com. The Twitter is @howtosurvivepod, and the Facebook address is facebook.com/howtosurvivepod.
Yeah, and maybe you thought we were unfair on From Dusk Till Dawn. Maybe you really like movies in which rapist murderers are protagonists and given no
depth or comeuppance.
Yeah. Maybe. Get in touch. Let us know. In the meantime, leave us a 5-star review as well on whatever you listen to your podcasts on.
Yeah.
iTunes is what I use, and I also check the reviews on that. So do it on there. 5 stars. Language of love.
Yeah.
Which is 5 more than I'd give From Dusk Till Dawn into that. Yeah. So any all those stars that it hasn't got can give to us.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
And Chris, one more thing. We're a podcast, but we're not a fucking podcast.
Thank God.